get like a, aha, they're selling chains in the Narthex. Well, that's not what this gospel is all about. It's much deeper than that. You have to understand something about the situation in Israel during this time period of the Roman occupation. You have basically a collaboration between the Roman authorities and the leaders of Israel as they are represented by the high priest and the Sanhedrin. That's the leadership of Israel, and they are working very closely together. Sometimes when we look at it, we say, well, you know, some of it's good and some of it's bad, but we have to begin to sift through and see exactly what Jesus is upset about. He is not simply upset about a bunch of peddlers in the narthex of the temple selling chickens and doves and turtles and whatever else they had out there, okay? That's not it at all. You see, it came with a price. If you ever go to a flea market and you see different peddlers there, usually they don't get that space for free. They have to pay for it. They have to pay for that space, and sometimes there's also a tax that's levied against whatever the peddler sells. So what we have here is an arrangement whereby the high priest, the Sanhedrin, the temple leadership are getting compensated for what was going on outside, and the focus now wasn't on the inside, but the focus was what was going on the outside, and on how they were able to collaborate with the Romans. Now remember, the Romans, they are controlling Israel, but they weren't the kind of people that cared very much about anything except what? They wanted to control the political situation and get their share of the taxes. That's what the Romans wanted. Not too different from a lot of governments today. Okay. Now, what Jesus is concerned about here is the fact that the essence of temple worship is being compromised. It's being compromised with the Romans. And that the chief priests and the Sadducees are also compromising themselves and the temple. Why? Because there's something in it for them. There's something in it for them. Let's leave it right there. Jesus throws them out of the temple. And now what? Things are going to be getting hotter and hotter for Jesus insofar as he has offended the leadership of Israel. And we're building now toward the passion. That's why they're going to get rid of him. They have to get rid of him because he's a threat to their power base. He's a threat to the purse. And he's a threat to the stability that they were able to establish with the Romans. They were collaborating with the Romans because it was profitable for them. And they also, in collaborating with the Romans, they were in some way diminishing the authority of God in Israel. That's what's going on here. Because Israel is God's vineyard, the vineyard of the Lord, and the Jewish people should be in charge of the vineyard of the Lord and not the Romans. They have collaboration going on here, being unfaithful to the law of God. Jesus goes there then as a reformer. It's always difficult to be a reformer. You see something wrong, you do something about it. You have a dramatic scene. This is something that you would see in the movies. He's throwing the tables over. He's chasing out the animals. When we look at this scene, we see that Jesus is saying that the temple has to be reformed. But so do the priests. The Jewish leadership needs to be reformed. That's what he's saying. And this has been the history of the church, believe it or not. The church is always in need of reform. It's not just a synagogue. You can't say, oh, Jesus, he reformed the temple, he reformed the synagogue, he told those chief priests and rabbis off. No. The gospel is for every time. Each and every one of us in every age. And so, let me just give you a brief look at the Protestant Reformation. That was a reform. The church needed to be reformed. Why? Well, because it was selling indulgences. And they would say, we want want to build St. Peter's Basilica. That was the goal. We want to build St. Peter's Basilica. And if you give us money, you will get an indulgence, and you'll be able to get a soul out of purgatory. And there was this monk, a Dominican monk, he had a Tetzel, went around Germany, and he would say, every time you drop a coin in the poor box, a soul is released and goes to heaven. You're paying for people to go to heaven. Luther said, you can't do that. You can't pay, you can't buy your way into heaven. And that's the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. Okay? Luther says the only way you get to heaven is how? Faith in Jesus Christ. That's what the Scripture says. And we have to measure ourselves against Scripture. And sometimes what happens is, and I'm not saying that, poor Peter Tetzel didn't mean well. If I make this money by selling indulgences and getting these souls into heaven, we can build St. Peter's Basilica. So we can get sometimes fooled by something that seems good, but yet is contrary to the teaching of the gospel. That's the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. St. Augustine said this: Ecclesia Semper Reformanda. Ecclesia Semper Reformanda, which means the church is always in need of reform. We can never say to ourselves, we got it, it's perfect. There's nothing that has to be done to make a correction according to the Scripture, because we can only go according to Scripture. We can only go what Scripture says. We can't make it up as we go along. Now, let's just take a look at a couple of things that are necessary for us to understand what it means to sometimes get hooked into things that we don't even realize, find ourselves collaborating in areas where we shouldn't be collaborating at the cost of our souls, the souls of other people, and the reputation of the church. Some of you might remember there was something called faith-based organizations. And this was a political idea at its root. And the idea was that the government would give money to churches in order to help them with their different ministries or programs to take care of the needs of the poor. Now, really, it's a pragmatic way of doing something. What do I mean by pragmatic? It means that I do something that I think is important, but I do it, for the wrong reason, or I compromise myself in doing it. So the government then would give money to a church and say, okay, we are going to give you money for your feeding program. You're going to have lunch for the poor every day. But there comes a caveat. There's a hook in that. What's the hook? But because you're taking government money, you can't have prayer before meals. You can't have a cross or a crucifix up where you're serving the meals. You cannot have a Bible study. And so some church leaders, they walk right into this. Let's get that money, we can feed the poor. But they gave up the mission of the church, which is to save souls. And therefore, from taking government money, the government actually took over the program and actually, in a sense, took over the ministry of the church and made it something that was secular, if not atheist, other than a place where souls can experience the love of Jesus Christ. Okay? So we leave that one right there. The next area is political correctness. We've heard this over and over and over again, political correctness. And people fall into this political correctness oftentimes because they want to be able to work with the political structure. They want to be able to work with other people. And so they want to share in power. And power is something that the political elites have. And oftentimes, guess what? Church people like rubbing elbows with those types. And so what happens then? Church people begin to keep quiet about things that are wrong because they don't want to offend those who are in positions of authority, power, political power. Sometimes they even begin to keep quiet about things that are dreadfully sinful. Like what? Oh, you're a Catholic, and you think abortion is just fine and should be allowed up to birth. You know what I'm talking about. It's compromising yourself. It's compromising yourself. That's political correctness because, well, I don't want to work with these people, and I don't want them to get mad at me, and I'll just keep my mouth shut. You compromise yourself, you compromise the church, you compromise the gospel. That's what Jesus is mad at here. Compromises. The last one is the area of being woke. And this happens to church people too, believe it or not. Everybody, likes to say, gee, I'm going with the flow. I am on the cutting edge of society like everybody else, and I don't want any kind of discrimination whatsoever. And so, I think I'm going to get a little bit, I'm going to be woke now too. Those things which I once considered to be wrong, sinful, immoral, I now say, well, maybe it's okay, and maybe I can even bless a situation that is immoral. I can bless what's wrong. When you bless what's wrong, you're saying something wrong is right. You can't do that without compromising yourself. So today, look at these areas. We see these areas of pragmatism, political correctness, wokeness. Does it affect the church? It sure does. Ecclesia, Semper, Reformanda. The church is always in need of reform, and it is.